So today I have been having a very interesting day. So I began this morning looking at the evolution of our soul and our soul's journey. And this began with me looking into the understanding of strength only comes through adversity and growth only comes through pain. And we see that in modern psychology. When we look at the phases of change, we understand that change only occurs when the pain becomes so unbearable that the person decides to change. Okay, so as I was going through this, I was looking at the hero's journey, particularly the 12 trials of heroes like Heracles. The 12 trials. The number 12 is very interesting within the esoteric world, as there are the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 strands of DNA, the 12 trials of the hero's journey. 12 makes an appearance quite a bit. 144 is the 12 times the 12,000. Okay, so as I was considering this, I was looking at this from the perspective of the natural evolution of us returning to the 12. So as I was thinking about the number 12, I was trying to consider what is the actual natural evolution of man. And as I was contemplating this, I hit a brick wall, and I determined that it was necessary for me to go for a walk. And so I started my walk. And as I was contemplating again, the first thing that came to my mind was actually a fairly interesting concept. I began to think of the tarot and the Major Arcana and the show of evolution within the cards themselves. So if we look at the Major Arcana, and I want to stipulate, this is not about the tarot. This is about your soul's journey, written within the Major Arcana. So we understand the energy of the tarot. But do you ever actually consider that it is not just a divination tool, but the actual guide on how to evolve one's soul? Are you ready? This is not going to be a short video. It's going to be very long, very drawn out, and very detailed. So let's begin. First and foremost, I do want to state the tarot that I am using. The deck is called the Tarot of Sacred Kingdoms, and it is absolutely, aside from just the fact that the art on this is amazingly gorgeous, the depth of into which the energy goes through the imagery on these cards is beyond the human realm and goes further into the depths of esoteric beliefs. Okay, so for example, Alvin, again, Alvin, green, and there are the blue. Okay, so and also the cups in this particular deck is very much so Atlantean or even mermaid. Poseidon comes to mind. I do want to mention a little bit about the imagery that is in the Major Arcana that is typical for most tarot. If there's anything that stands out in the imagery in this that can explain the evolution based on the theory that I am understanding, then I will explain it. Okay, so the very first thing that we have is in the Major Arcana, it starts with the number 0. Now this is interesting because within the world of numerology, 0 is, I don't want to say like a placeholder, it's an amplifier. Okay, so when we look at the number 0, 0 is the number of possibility. Anything can happen with the number 0. And I'll explain that. Okay, so as I'm as I'm walking, I am envisioning the Primordial Sea. And on this Primordial Sea, there is a very visible horizon. The waters are choppy in the Primordial Ocean. And then upon the horizon is just darkness. Nothing but darkness. But you can see the difference between the waves of the chaos and the serenity of the absolute abyss. Okay? Now this is the a symbolization of existence prior to existence. Okay? And now we have the zero, which is the fool. I imagine a child unable to comprehend the difference between self, ocean, and sky. That child is floating on a buoy, just a simple buoy, completely unaware of what is beneath the surface and what is above in the abyss, solely aware of self, undifferentiated. We can correlate this to the monad in the Gnostic text, the existence of nothingness inside of wholeness. So as the zero, you are absolute potential without differentiation between action and being. This is the fool energy. Okay? Now, see this card. This is not your typical visualization of the fool. Now, you do have the white wolf, which is going alongside of the individual. Understand that the fool is androgynous. The fool is androgynous because the fool has not differentiated self from the whole. It is simply being on top of that buoy between the worlds, unaware of what is underneath, unaware of what is above, simply self without differentiation, which is why it is androgynous, meaning it does not have gender of masculine or feminine. It is both, because it is potential without action. Okay? This is the fool energy. This is the energy you come into the world with. Think of being an infant, not as a being, but as a being that is experiencing the world around it and cannot yet interact with that world, therefore cannot separate self from that world. We see this in child psychology. The child is unable to differentiate the reason of actions, seeing self as the only possible reason for any action that happens to it. We call this egocentric. Okay? This is solely the before you differentiated self from everything. This is before you identified self. Now, the word fool is even more interesting because we don't see the fool as necessarily a good thing. When we call somebody a fool, we're calling them ignorant. But is the fool truly ignorant or not ignorant before the veil has been dropped? Okay? So the ability to not differentiate self from others is actually the ability we had prior to incarnation. When we're in this energy, this is the energy of knowing that one is one with everything. This does not mean that you are not unique. You are a unique spark of the everything. Okay? That is the fool energy. That energy allows you to be able to exist and be without worry, without concern. Now, others may see this as foolish, but to the fool, it's literally just being on the buoy, experiencing what it is to experience between identification of self and indifferentiation between self and the outside world. Okay? This is your first stage. Look at this as experiencing the quantum realm. Because the quantum realm is exactly that. An endless sea of possibilities that have not yet taken form because it has not been noticed. Think of the double slit experiment. The particle will act differently, retroactively, once observed, but without differentiation. It is exactly a piece of everything else. Full potential, no action. Okay? Next, we have the magician. Now, the imagery that came to my mind when I was moving on from the fool to the magician, we are still this being on top of this buoy on the chaotic primordial sea, separated solely by the horizon. No stars in the sky, no idea what's going on beneath. Okay? Now, the magician, I love the imagery of this. Okay? The magician creates something out of what others perceive as nothing. But the magician knows about the quantum realm. He remembers being the fool. He remembers that all he has to do is focus that potential into energy, which is exactly what this magician is doing. Now, inside of my mind, I am imagining a magician who is now turning this buoy into a spaceship and zooming from the chaos of the primordial ocean through into the abyss to explore that which is unknown. He transformed the material around him into something new in order to experience the unknown. This is just like the magician. Okay, so the magician energy within the tarot is you being told you have the power to manifest the life you see around you, or you want to see around you. Now, this is misunderstood a lot of the times, and people see manifestation as a desire that they can get. That's not what it is. It is understanding that the world you create within is reflected in the world around you in timing. What does that mean? As your ability increases, meaning as your soul evolves, you become much more efficient at creating out of the primordial soup. Manifestation changes form as you evolve. If we think of the world as created over billions of years, we see creation slowly take form. But science is showing that there's evidence of universes out there that have existed since before they should have been able to exist if they followed the timeline of our understanding of time. But if we are considering the fact that we are so much younger as a race than the ones that came way at the beginning, their ability to manifest is probably a lot further along than ours as humans, because we have not quite evolved to this form of materialization. But this is not something that we can consider as an impossibility, because all things are possible within the quantum realm. So, when you maximize your potential of understanding that which you create without, you can practice in little ways, subtly changing your perception of reality by changing the way you perceive it. The magician has the ability to manipulate material through the ability to conjure in the quantum, basically being able to communicate with the particles themselves and say, hey, I know you have the potential to do this. Let's make it happen. Okay? Now, let's move on to the high priestess. Now, while the magician creates the rocket ship out of the buoy, the material he already has, the high priestess, and I absolutely love the imagery on this, okay? The high priestess doesn't need to change the material around her. She has the ability to connect with that which is beyond which she can see. Yes, the magician can speak to the quantum realm. So can the high priestess, but in a different way. She uses the frequency in order to communicate with the quantum realm. While the magician uses the material to create, the high priestess uses frequency to communicate. These two together, oh my gosh. This is where the legend of the gods was born. The high priestess meets the magician. Let's make it happen, Captain. Okay, so the high priestess communicates to the higher realms what it is she wishes to see and experience in her world. It doesn't have to be material. The high priestess is connected to the frequency that carries the waves that she is experiencing. She sees beyond the physical. This is her light, and this is her light. This one doesn't have a third eye, but I love the fact that both of her eyes are glowing because this is beyond the ability of a human. This is the ability of the divine, the ability to see and perceive that which the human eyes cannot perceive. Okay, the next comes the Emperor. Now we're back to the buoy. The buoy is no longer in space. It is back onto the primordial ocean, okay? Now we have the Emperor. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because while these two are working beyond the material and or into the quantum realm, the Emperor builds onto that buoy. Here is this Emperor. What does that Emperor look like to you? I see, we're not going to go into that. Okay, so imagine the buoy again. Now, the Emperor is like, I claim this as mine, and I will expand. And he creates a giant empire, building on to that buoy until he creates land. The Emperor then rules over that land as its owner, as its protector, as its connection to the afterrealm, or afterrealm, the afterworld, the other world, the underworld, the overworld, whatever you want to call it, the life beyond what is seen. Okay, so the Emperor takes control. This is the first de-evolution of humanity. When the human decides that it is dominion, that it has dominion over that which has survived for longer than even mankind can comprehend, this is where he messes up. Okay, but this is where we are in the evolutionary journey. Okay, so we can look at this as all of this right here was the golden age, and then came the man who ruled over the world. I am not specifically talking about gender. Do not take me wrong. I am specifically talking about mankind as a whole, because there were females throughout history that were just as vicious. I don't know many of them because they don't write about them. Anyhow, so he takes control over the material and builds and grows from there. Okay, that's the Emperor. The Empress, oh, look at her. She sees that which the Emperor has built in his control and in his desire to expand, and takes the beauty of that and fills the empire with love, beauty, and joy, the experiences of life. So while he provides a place for the garden to grow, she is the one that tends to it. She gives the life, the love, the beauty. He provides the hall. Okay? Now, here we go deeper into our evolution of man. So man has created his garden, and woman has created the beauty within that garden. And if we take that to the Garden of Eden, we see this is hidden within the storyline, the creation between human and Gaia. When the veil fell, this created amnesia, and we forgot how to work with the natural elements and decided to instead create laws. In walks the Hierophant. This particular card has a feminine Hierophant. Most Hierophant cards, as a matter of fact, if I were to grab my other deck, I would show you, it looks like a bishop. And that's exactly what happened. Okay, so looking again at the evolution of man, we see that man, after forgetting the golden age, created his own divine laws in order to create a rigid structure of society. Here's the problem: rigidity. This is a really hard thing to balance, because if you don't understand the balance and the line that is very thin that creates disorder, it's in the understanding. Okay, let's talk about that. All right, so when you have your aeons, when you have your principles, your divine natural laws, natural order, it's different from law and order, or order versus chaos, okay? Order and chaos are the exact same thing, different sides of the coin, okay? When you separate the two, you now create order versus chaos. This is not the natural order of things. The natural order of things is exactly that, natural order. Look at the cycles of life. Look at the cycles of stars. It isn't about destruction or chaos. It is literally about wiping the slate clean of the old and allowing the new to take form. This is a concept that was completely forgotten when man created rigid law and order. Understand, all you gotta do is, even if you only slightly believe half of the things that are said in the past, look at the lengths of years the kings served in ancient times. Just look at the age of Abraham. He was 900 years old. Their calendar wasn't much different from ours. It still utilized an entire year. The sun hasn't changed. What changed? This. When we try to introduce man's understanding of law and order, or AKA natural order, we disrupted that natural order because our minds separated the same exact thing. Without natural order, decay would overrun and therefore destroy the planet. Without man, even a planet that hasn't had the sufficient atmosphere to have life, is still operating on the exact same time schedule as it has been for who knows how long, by itself, in the natural order of the cosmos. If it wasn't meant to be there, it wouldn't be there. If it was meant to be gone, it would be. So when we put rigid laws in place, we forgot about the flow of the river. The natural order cannot be disrupted by man's law. That which is natural, aka what some people would call karma, that is divine order. The tree that falls during a storm was not toppled by the storm. It was toppled because it was its time to go. The storm was simply the push the tree needed to fall. If it weren't for that storm, that tree would eventually fall in its own way. The storm is simply there to move along the process for the natural order. So, when we placed laws in place to govern life itself, and I'm talking about all of them, including the clock and the calendar, when we put those laws into place, we fucked up our own natural order, creating chaos within the mind. When they further screwed it up by completely disrupting our entire circadian rhythm, they locked us into this. Now, when we remove ourselves from this, wouldn't you know, the natural flow brings to us that which we forgot in our rigidity. Are you ready? I absolutely love this version of the Lover's card because it is absolutely everything you need to understand about your evolution. The number 6 in the Major Arcana is the Lovers, and it is typically two people. Not in this deck. It is the light falling in love with its own shadow. Understand, just like order and chaos, you have an opposite side to your coin. It's not evil. It is your natural way of being. It is only when we learn how to overcome this need to survive that we can see the natural reason we have a shadow aspect. I want to talk to you about Ra. Very quickly. Ra originally was not just Ra. Ra was androgynous. He was both Mat, divine order and justice, and Ra, the sun, life and justice. The light brings life. Ma'at was there to ensure chaos never reached the light. When Ra ripped Ma'at from himself out of fear, he created the very thing he spent night after night trying to destroy. He created the chaos serpent. by severing his own self from him. When we try to remove our shadow or sin because we think it's bad, we criticize self. We hate self. We try to escape self. But when we realize that duality is simply a concept we haven't quite grasped in our evolutionary stage, then we can see the natural order of that which we consider shameful. And do not get me wrong, I am not talking about pure fucking evil. That's different. And we'll get into that later when we get to number 15. So, understanding that your shadow aspect is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a part of your evolution. And understanding what created those shadow aspects will help you to love yourself more. What does that lead to? The what? The what? The chariot. The chariot is your transformation vehicle. That doesn't mean that the story is over. It doesn't even mean that this is the only time you'll ever see this. You will see this time and time and time and time again. Because, honey, if you ain't changing, you're fucking up. No joke. If you haven't changed in the last 15 years of your life, you're stagnating. Wake up. Change is living. Change is evolution. The only way to grow is to change. And as I said before, pain is the only thing that gets us to change. Now, look at this particular chariot card. Most chariots have, you have the symbol of the two animals, whatever animals they are, that are pulling the chariot, and they're usually, one is black, one is white, and then the chariot driver has like all kinds of like armor, and sometimes there's fire. You know, this one is two dragons with a woman who's wearing a crown. A dragon queen? What does a dragon queen do? She protects. She embodies. She doesn't control. She's one with. This is the transformation. If you want to look into the deep esoteric beliefs of the serpent and the dragon being our freedom, then look at it that way. Or you can simply look at this as times change. Everything changes. Everything changes. Again, if you ain't chaining, if you, I was saying the military thing, if it ain't raining, you ain't training. If it ain't changing, you ain't training. Okay, the next one is the strength card. Now, I really love the chariot and the strength are next to each other, but the way that these are all like laid out perfectly is wonderful. Okay, because it takes a lot of strength to change. I was actually having this conversation with my daughter last night. She's 9 years old, and trying to explain to her the importance of consistency in change was like trying to pull my own wisdom teeth. I love this strength card. Okay, so most strength cards that I've ever seen, they have the lion, the snake, and the woman. Okay, and if you look at the imagery and those particular cards, it looks as though the woman is trying to calm down the lion, who is staring directly at the serpent, ready to strike, while the woman is reaching towards the snake as if to say, do not strike, to both the lion, who is trying to protect her, and the snake, who is trying to strike her. Okay? So this one, I love it. She is nose to nose with that lion. No fear. Compassion, strength, courage. These are all required to change because it takes strength to look at oneself and say, yeah, I'm the problem. I need to change. Or, this is the problem. I will change this. Or, the understanding I have is the problem. I will change this. That which you have the ability to change is yours alone to change. You are the only one who carries the strength to see that change come to fruition. This is the next stage in your evolutionary journey. Because again, you will never be strong without adversity. Just think about it. Think about this. Think about those people that you may have seen, you don't know, but you've seen them like in the news, they were literally born with a silver spoon in their mouth, never experienced anything except for maybe a bad word from another person, but they've never experienced what it's like to go hungry. They've never experienced what it's like to not be able to make a payment on their car. They've never experienced what it's like to be bullied fully to the point of being beat beyond recognition because you were perceived as weak. This doesn't breed strength. This breeds arrogance. One who believes they are strong, but if you were to toss them among the lions, they would be devoured because they don't have the ability to have strength. I'm not saying that is every single person who's ever had a privileged life. I'm just saying it's not the same between the life of a person who's never experienced adversity versus the life of a person who's experienced nothing but adversity. The strength is unparalleled. They're not the same. And the compassion that this person has compared to that person, you can see it fucking visibly. I'd give my shirt off my back to help somebody else. Even if I didn't have enough money to pay for bread this week, I would still do it. And yet you see people that spend $50 million on a fucking wedding? Mind blown. No strength. No ability to say no to the extravagant. Or yes to helping others. There's no strength there. There's no compassion there. This doesn't exist in somebody who's never experienced adversity. This is why evolution is necessary. So what? You know what happens after you've hopped on that chariot and found your strength and your courage and your everything? You get tired of the fucking world and you go inward. Now we've reverted back to the original two, the magician and the high priestess. The hermit is returning. The hermit is saying, there was something there. I remember it, but I can't quite figure it out with all this freaking noise. So then you silence everything. You isolate. You remove yourself from the world that is trying to corrupt you, and you find that spark within. See how that spark's in the exact same place as where it was on the high priestess? Oh, I wonder why. So now we've come full circle. We've gone through the de-evolution, the golden age, the de-evolution of man, to the realization that this is not what's working for me, so I'm going to change. And that led to the strength, but led to the, oh my God, I need to separate from the world. What does that lead to? The Wheel of Fortune. Ah, yeah. Now you remember, oh, fuck, I'm the magician. That's right. I don't need to follow your stupid empire stuff. I can create gold from base metals, like an alchemist. All right, because I remember that while I was in hermit mode. And now your golden gate is unlocked because you didn't even realize it was never really locked. And I have found all that I have been searching for. But you know what's crazy? The ones who are truly searching, they're not looking for gold. They're not. So your gold is perfectly safe, Emperor. I promise. Because I don't want your gold. See, what's on the inside of that building is far more precious than any gold. It's enlightenment. It's the realization that as the world turns, so do I. Oh, wait. So that means as the poles begin to shift, I can just walk along the equator and be perfectly fine? Oh, I'm in control of the Wheel of Fortune. Really? You don't say. Evolution. But you've just had an incredibly interesting journey. You went from being the enlightened one to the soiled one, to the changed one, to the inner one, to the one who controls that which we have control over. But it is necessary to face the justice of that which you have done and that which was done to you. This card, I think, is like the best example of the justice card I could ever imagine. Because as you see, this knight who is already going through this is part of his evolution, right? So he's now a knight in God's army. Because that's typically what happens. Once you've unlocked this Wheel of Fortune, you're like, I gotta protect this fucking secret. So you become a knight, the warrior of the light. But first you must face that which you have done. None of us is perfect. Every single one of us has done something outside of the natural order of the divine law. Not on purpose sometimes on purpose. So we must face that. As you see, he is bowing. He is recognizing, yes, I have done this. I will make my amends. I will change my ways. I promise. And on top of that, give you all of my loyalty. Because your mercy has set me free. Now I will serve you until the end of everything, which will never come. So, forever, I will serve you. This is not only repaying one's debts, but re-solidifying the relationship with the divine. Now, this leads to when one is faced with understanding that which they caused, not only to themselves, but to their brethren, to their family, to their loved ones, whatever. This leads into the next phase of your evolution. Now, this is the part where we get super freaking frustrated because the hardest lesson of all time is, of course, patience. Why? Because it takes time to build patience. We go into the Hangman. Now, I absolutely love, and I particularly chose this deck for this particular reason, because the imagery on this is far more suitable for this particular conversation, okay? So once you've realized that which you have done and that which you must make amends for, now it's time to face oneself in the mirror, but with a new perspective. This man, which usually the Hangman, most people get frustrated because that means that there's going to be a waiting, a delay, as they consider it. But it's not. This is literally a time for you to pause and reflect. Look at the landscape around you. How has it changed? How has your understanding of life changed? What is it now that is different than before? What is the direction of your path now that you have completely re-understood life from a completely different perspective? All that glittered before and was made of gold now seems hollow and rings for some reason. But there's something out there, that golden horizon. It shines prettier than any gold man ever made. Maybe I'll head there. Maybe there's something there. Now, we've talked about natural order. Let's talk about what happens after the end of your life or the end of a situation. This is when the death card comes out. Now, I love this because this is the exact opposite of the Lovers card, right? So you have the white dragon with the black dressed white gentleman who looks kind of like a ghost, okay? This is the representation of death. Again, natural order. This doesn't necessarily indicate a physical death. It can be an ego death. It could be the end of a situation. It could be the end of a cycle. It could be the end of anything. Remember natural order. Everything eventually ends. But end doesn't mean end. It literally means transformation. Because when one goes from being, even if we're just talking about actual physical death, take away all of the boxes, the pine boxes, and go back to the original, the way that we used to bury. We wrapped them in cloth and buried them in the earth so that they may become, once again, one with the earth. From ashes to ashes, dust to dust is what we say, right? Although that's not a quite understanding of the words. But you get the symbolism, okay? So when we get buried and we're not in a coffin, we actually become one with the dirt again. We decompose. We become one with earth. We now have transformed from the human into the earth. This is a transformation of the physical body. But it doesn't necessarily mean the end of the spiritual body. Now, I'm not going to talk about like ghosts and trapped spirits between realms or any of that. I am literally just talking about when the body ends, it begins a new life cycle as a part of the earth, while the soul moves on to its next destination. If you didn't pass Earth School, you're going to go back to Earth School. If you passed Earth School and you passed your test, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you get 3 chances. Spoiler, don't go to the link. If you end up making it through them, then you can transition to the next stage of your spiritual evolution, whatever the soul's journey is, whatever you as a soul with the divine creator have decided is your soul path. That is where you will go. Okay? Death is not an end. It's a transformation, a transmutation, an alchemical change. It's up to you to determine what was the cause of death. And that's important. That's extremely important. And I'm not talking about physical death. I'm talking about the end of the situation, okay? If you don't go back and observe objectively, like I say all the time, that which occurred, what's to help you from stopping it from occurring again? Nothing. Which is exactly why the next card is Temperance. Now, a lot of people see temperance as solely balance, but that's not exactly what the word temperance means, okay? Think about the temperance movement when it was all about maintaining blah, 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 blah. Okay, no. All right. I'm going to explain it to you this way, okay? I'm going to draw to your attention the fact that this actually looks like a mermaid with wings, okay? So, just, yeah. When, and I say mermaid, that's actually a merman. Interesting. Androgynous, apparently. Makes sense. Angels are androgynous. Okay, so if we look at the temperance as you have 2 lines, okay? And this actually came to a friend of mine in a dream recently, and it was very profound, the way that it portrayed itself. Okay, so if we have a line on either side, okay? Let's say that both of these lines are the Bifrost Bridge, okay? Now, the lowest level of that Bifrost Bridge includes the physical realm, but it's like an in-between. It's not quite reality, but it's not quite the chaos of the actual underworld, which is the quantum realm of endless potential without actual action. The chaotic primordial ocean is still out there. It's just... Oh. That just vanished, so apparently it wasn't something I needed to talk about. So when we're looking at these two lines, let's say that on this line, and this is solely based on my natural movements, this is the left-hand side, okay? On this side of the line, over here, we have absolute light. In that absolute light is absolute stillness, okay? This is returning to, whether you see it as the monad or the pleroma or whatever it is, the divine realm of absolute stillness. Now, there's a reason why it's absolutely still, and this is all about balance, okay? On this side of the line, this is my right hand, this is on the right side. On this side of the line, you have absolute darkness, chaos, the abyss. Separate the two, chaos and the abyss, okay? Over here is the end. And I say the end because going out into the chaos and coming back, if you don't have a line, is very difficult. To find one's way back from absolute chaos, it requires you to go through the entire process all over again. That's breaking down into the very possibility of all possibilities, and then working your way back up into consciousness, and then into form, and then from form back into the beyond form in order to be living in that non-form form. Oh, that's hard to explain. That's really hard to explain. Okay, so between these two lines, this is what I would look at as the Bifrost or the Rainbow Bridge, okay? So on the one side, you have absolute stillness returning to source, being one with the universe, that which the Buddhist work to achieve, to become one with the universe, okay? That is on that side of the line, okay? Then within this nice little flowy area in between, okay? At the very tippy top, you have your higher realms, your 7th, 8th, 9th dimensions. Let's say everything beyond here is like 10th dimension and beyond, okay? So you have your 7th, 8th, 9th, 6th, and 5th, and 4th dimensions, okay? At the very line, that is this line, this is your 3rd dimension. This is your last chance. All aboard or get the fuck off and go out to the chaos. You don't want to say you fucked up beyond the point, but you almost fucked up beyond the point. And if you fuck up at this point, oh boy. Oh, I don't want to see what's going to happen out there. That's the, yeah. That's the end. Do you want the end? That's up to you, right? Only you're the one that pulled the plug. So on this arm, we have our 3rd dimension. Within that 3rd dimension, you have a particular line that you cannot cross. If you cross that line, that leads to death, which ends up in restart in 3rd dimension, unless you fuck up beyond control, beyond balance, and in which case you're bifly. So, temperance is learning how to live within these lines without being told, hey, don't cross that fucking line. That's sovereignty. That is this. After you've experienced this, you can finally experience this. Until you experience the end, you cannot experience a new beginning. this new beginning is literally the return to who you are. The return to your state prior to coming into the third dimension. We don't form in the third dimension. We come from the higher dimensions into the third dimension and then back to the higher dimensions, okay? So let's get to the exciting one, the devil. Okay, so if you have temperance as this is like the opposite of temperance. Okay, so while temperance teaches you to stay within the lines because you know what happens on either side of that line and you don't want to go on either side of that line, then you have the devil. Now, this is not necessarily the evil fire and brimstone lake of fire. This is your inability to control yourself and maintain your responsibility. This is the lack of sovereignty. This is sovereignty. This is the lack of sovereignty. These two are bound to that beast. Actually, there's only one bound to this beast in this one. Typically, it's two. There's only one. But this is you bound to whatever it is that you feel like you don't have control over. It's up to you to learn how to control that in order to evolve past that inability to control and find that temperance. Okay? So, how, again, do we change? Most of the time, we need to be smacked in the fucking face. Yeah, we need to be smacked in the fucking face. Think about it. Think about this, okay? You are freaking the fuck out because you've got a whole bunch of shit going on in your life and you can't figure out how to slow the fuck. Thanks, I needed that. Tower moment. It's not about losing that which you desired. It's about rewiring your understanding of what you desired because what you desired didn't belong in your life. No joke. That's what a tower is. It is the crumbling of that which does not belong in your life. This leads to growth. This does not. This leads to stagnation. This will blow this the fuck up so you wake the fuck up and become the star. So when we've evolved past that which we cannot control, and we found the balance by living through the moment that burned us to fucking hell, guess what that gave us the ability to do? To be pure enough to become a star ourselves. Once you caught fire, you never stopped burning, and you burned so bright, you became a star. Then you became a constellation. Yeah. So there's two other celestial bodies in the Major Arcana. And I want to discuss these other two celestial bodies with the star understanding, okay? So we have the star, the moon, and the sun. So the star and the moon, the star and the sun are basically the exact same thing, right? It's just that one is here and one is further away. But that doesn't change their power. They both have the same power. This is just local, meaning you're building up your power to eventually become a star. Yes, the sun is a star, but the sun is the local star. This is the interstellar traveler. This is more than these two, not necessarily in the respect of better, but more as in you have more control than the sun. Because when you think of a star, you are thinking about how far that light has traveled to reach your vision. The star traveled from further away than the sun. So if you see this sun is a very tiny little guy with a bunch of fire in his hand, with a dragon behind him, of course. This is the representation of our sun as a young star compared to this star. That doesn't make it better in the respect that it has more respect. It is just wiser. So while this one has hair of white, and this one has hair of white, they're not the same age. One is mature, while the other is still learning about life. This is the Fool energy come full circle into the sun. Now, why do we have the moon opposite of the sun? Ah, the moon, that which illuminates the shadows of the night. The one who causes us to go crazy. The one by whom we should live our cycles. But we don't. But that's okay. The moon is a part of your transition. See, the reason why is because the moon is very cyclical in nature, but she becomes wildly energetic every time she's full. Some see this as inconsistency, but for her, this is the ebb and flow of the natural waves of life. She has become perfectly accepting of her own volatility because that volatility allows her to have balance. She maintains where she's supposed to be, wild as she is the entire time that she's doing it. This right here makes you unstoppable because you know that line. You don't cross that line, but you're gonna dance around like a fairy princess the entire time in between those lines. Wild, carefree, but living within your cycles. This is your joy. And this is your wildness with order. Both of these have order and enjoy that which they are within the confines of their line. Now, we go into the last two of the Major Arcana. This has been more than an hour video, and if you watched this far, holy cow, dude, congratulations. Because you and I stopped listening to me a long ass time ago. I'm just kidding. All right, so the last two that we have are the Judgment and the World. Now, I want you to think about the Judgment as not necessarily like the seven seals, but at the same time kind of do. Okay, so the reason why the World is the last one is, think about this. When you finally reach the end of your evolutionary journey, you do what? You become that which you just went through. You evolve to the next stage of your evolutionary journey. Planets aren't just rocks. They have consciousness. Stars, suns, moons, they have consciousness. When we go from being in this tiny form and learn how to use the power that's within this tiny form, it gives us the ability to be able to control ourselves as, say, a planet, maintaining one's orbit so as to not spin out of control and knock into the other planets like a marble on a table. Once you've learned how to control the power of the being within the confines of the atom, then the confines of the atom no longer become your cage. You can experience experiences and existence in other forms, whether it be a flower, a tree, an ant, the sky, the clouds, the earth itself, the sun, the constellations, whatever your heart desires. This is your end of the line. But it's not an end of the line. It's the becoming of the line. The world began with a dragon. The world shall end as a dragon. Why? Because the world was a dragon the entire time. You just didn't realize it. Metaphorically, not literally. Unless... you never know. There is a myth out there. So the judgment that comes, this isn't like end of the world, apocalypse. No. Apocalypse isn't even an understood word. It is more along the lines of that which must be brought into order, shall be brought into order, and that which is fine shall thrive. It's literally a call for the end of line. Let's say you've been a bad person, and I don't like using the word bad, because there's very few that actually are legit rare. But those who have proven time and time again, given chance time and time again, to, I don't even want to say correct, recalibrate. If they chose not to, at which point does the divine say, okay, I am technically you. I feel as though I no longer can stand that which I have done through you. And so I myself choose, through my free will, to end the energy that is me in this form. That would be divine judgment. When the divine itself decides, this is an aspect of myself I do not like, his free will, or her, their, androgynous, their free will, now becomes divine law. Think of Ma'at and her feather, the weighing of the heart at the end of life. If the heart was weighed down by poor consciousness, poor decisions, poor thinking of other people, it becomes heavy, weighted by the density of one's soul. If it is heavier than that feather, your free will is now Ma'at's, and Ma'at chooses to destroy the soul that weighs more than the feather. This is judgment. Period. So, as you can see, the evolution of the soul starts with the fool, the inability to, I shouldn't say the inability, the lack of differentiation between oneself and the universe, and then becoming the universe. From start to end, you begin with androgyny and indifferentiation, and end as becoming one with the collective, the world, the whole. Again, returning to indifferentiation between self and other. I hope you guys are having a fabulous day. Bye-bye now.